Respect isn't a gift others give you, it's a reflection of how you live. It doesn't come from fame, money, or power, but from the habits you repeat every single day, often without realizing it. Some people lose the respect of others not because they're malicious, but because they fail to see that their own behavior quietly pushes people away. In today's world, people care more about how to be liked than how to be respected. They forget that affection can fade, but respect endures like stone. When people like you, it's because of emotion. When they respect you, it's because of character. And character can't be faked. It reveals itself in the smallest actions, in how you speak, how you keep your word, and how you face hardship. Take a hard look at the smallest behaviors: a casual rumor, a promise you don't keep, interrupting someone mid-sentence, or the same weary sighs of complaint again and again. They aren't loud or dramatic, but they erode trust slowly and surely. They make others see you differently, not because they're harsh, but because your stance is no longer reliable. Stoicism isn't just a doctrine of endurance, it's the art of living with order. Those who live in the Stoic spirit don't try to look strong, they simply work to keep their minds from being pulled into what is base. They understand that respect can't be bought with words. It can only be built through inner discipline. And that discipline is tested every time we stand between two choices: to be silent or to speak, to keep our word or to break it, to listen or to cut in, to be grateful or to complain. The 4 habits you're about to hear aren't major mistakes, but they are the ones that quietly make people lose respect for you. They're the subtle cracks in the foundation of character. A person can master hundreds of skills and achieve countless successes. But if they don't recognize and correct these 4 habits, they'll eventually lose the most valuable thing of all: respect. The first habit is talking behind someone's back. Not every wound comes from action. Some are inflicted by words light as air, yet powerful enough to shatter a bond. People often comfort themselves by saying, "I was just joking," or "I didn't mean any harm." But intentions never erase consequences. When we speak about someone who isn't present, we lay the first brick in the wall that separates us from our own dignity. Gossip is one of the most dangerous habits because it disguises itself as intimacy. It makes us believe we're sharing when in truth, we're judging. It makes us feel closer to the listener, even as we quietly diminish the one being spoken about. And the irony is this: every time we lower someone else, we also lower ourselves in the eyes of those who hear us. Because who can trust that we won't speak the same way about them once they turn their back? A Stoic understands that words are the imprint of the soul. An undisciplined mind does not know where kindness ends and cruelty begins. When we judge others, we don't just wound them. We train our minds to look outward, constantly searching for flaws. And soon we find ourselves living in a world full of faults, not because others are worse, but because we've lost the ability to look within. The more a person talks about others' mistakes, the further they drift from self-awareness. In silence, a person returns to their own center, a place where they no longer seek victory through words, but through the purity of inner peace. Those who know when to stay silent aren't weak, they simply understand the value of sound. Not everything we know deserves to be spoken. Sometimes the most valuable part of a conversation isn't what is said, but what we're wise enough to keep to ourselves. Speaking ill of others doesn't just hurt the one being talked about, it also takes away the freedom of the one speaking. From the moment we spread a rumor, we become prisoners of our own words. We must remember what we said, to whom, and fear the day it returns. An honest person never needs to remember, because they only speak what can be repeated anywhere. But the double-minded live in fear, for the truth needs only one spark to burn through every lie. Epictetus once said, "Do not waste your words on others when you yourself are not yet complete." It's a reminder of humility. Each time we speak of another's flaws, we should remember we stand among the flawed as well. If everyone deserves compassion to change, then we too should offer that compassion through silence. Kindness doesn't always need to be spoken. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to speak. Talking behind someone's back is how a person quietly loses respect without realizing it. The wise don't trust those who gossip, and the kind don't take pleasure in hearing others torn down. When we speak of others, we teach listeners how they are allowed to see us. And if one day they speak about us the same way, we have no right to complain, for we were the first to plant the seed. The Stoic chooses silence as a form of strength. They don't join the chatter because they know every conversation held behind someone's back is a graveyard where honor is buried. They neither defend nor condemn. They simply stand still. In a noisy world, their silence becomes the loudest declaration. I do not belong to this. Some say silence is complicity. But to those who understand Stoicism, silence is freedom. It's the ability to choose what's worthy of our energy. It's a way of telling the world that we will not let others' faults drag down our own character. When we stop speaking of others' mistakes, we begin to hear the voice of our own conscience more clearly. Words never carry the same weight as the silence of a disciplined mind. Respect doesn't come from speaking cleverly, but from knowing when not to speak. The world doesn't need more whispers. It needs more souls calm enough to listen. And if we wish to be respected, we must first learn to respect the absence of others in our own words. The second habit Stoic philosophy warns against is being unreliable. Some people lose the respect of others, not because they do wrong, but because they fail to do what they promised. No one applauds when you keep your word, but everyone remembers when you don't. A person's honor doesn't lie in what they say, it lies in the endurance of their words. A promise, no matter how small, is a thread that connects two souls. When it's broken, what tears apart isn't just the thread, but trust itself. To the Stoic, reliability is the foundation of virtue. When a person is no longer trustworthy, every other quality they possess begins to fade. A talented person who doesn't keep their word is merely lucky. A knowledgeable person who can't be trusted is merely a clever pretender. Once trust is lost, it can't be patched with apologies. It can only be rebuilt with time, something very few people have the patience to give. Unreliability never appears suddenly. It begins with small things. Being late once, forgetting a promise once, making a commitment without meaning it. We often think such things are harmless, but that harmlessness is the trap. Because once we grow used to breaking promises, we lose the shame that should come with it. And when shame disappears, honor follows. The Stoic doesn't say, I will do it. They simply do it. They understand that a promise is a double-edged sword. The more you speak, the more you risk dulling your own honor. They choose restraint. Speak less. Keep more. Knowing that silence fulfilled is worth more than 1,000 unkept words. In a world where everyone talks too much, the one who keeps their word becomes rare. Unreliability isn't just a betrayal of others, it's a disconnection from oneself. When you say something but fail to do it, your mind and actions split apart. You no longer live as a whole person, but as two halves, one that speaks and one that justifies. That division is the root of inner unease. A Stoic keeps their word not for praise, but for peace, because keeping one's word is a way of keeping one's soul intact. Every word spoken is a carving upon the world, and each carving cannot be erased. Those who live responsibly with their words understand that every promise is an imprint placed upon another person's trust, and the wise leave that imprint only when they are certain they can uphold it. When a person loses reliability, they will find themselves alone, not because others leave, but because no one wants to draw near. People can forgive mistakes, but they won't rely on someone who's made them fall more than once. In every broken promise lies an invisible form of disrespect, disregard for another's time, effort, and expectation. And in each of those acts of disregard, we quietly erode our own worth. The Stoic values action over words. They believe that character isn't measured by intention, but by the consistency between word and deed. A person may be skilled at excuses or eloquent in explanations, but without reliability, their words lose all weight like a coin that still has shape, but no longer holds value. Trustworthiness is a treasure that cannot be borrowed or bought. It's built through small acts by keeping promises, showing up on time, and doing what you said you would do. The Stoic knows that every fulfilled commitment, no matter how small, strengthens the soul's integrity. And integrity, not talent or status, is what earns true respect. A life can be defined by how one treats their own words. If speech is breath, then keeping your word is dignity. A person may fail, may stumble, But if they remain trustworthy, they will still be respected. Once that trust is lost, every other success becomes an illusion. So live as though every word you speak is a sacred vow. Be the kind of person others can rely on without hesitation. And when you do that, you gain more than the respect of others. You gain the peace of a person who no longer needs to speak much because their actions have already said it all. Interrupting and failing to listen is another habit that makes people lose respect for you. Silence is the mirror of the mind. When we truly listen, we see ourselves reflected in another person's eyes. But when we constantly interrupt, all we see is the shadow of our own ego. Between two people in conversation, an interruption may seem like a small crack, but repeated often enough, it can shatter the bridge of respect. The one being interrupted doesn't just feel annoyed, they feel invisible. And there's no faster way to lose respect than to make someone feel unseen, unheard, and unacknowledged. Those who can't resist cutting into others' words often don't realize that they're not engaging in a dialogue, they're fighting for control. They try to dominate the flow of the conversation, to assert the ego, to prove that they know more, understand faster, or simply can't bear the discomfort of waiting. But the Stoic understands that patience is the highest form of strength. Only those who have mastered themselves can sit quietly in silence and allow others to finish what they have to say. Every time we interrupt, we send an unspoken message. I am more important than you. And though the listener may smile, nod, or continue the conversation, they receive that message clearly. Inside, a door quietly closes. Because respect doesn't lie only in grand gestures, it lives in the space we give others to simply be themselves. A person who cannot listen doesn't just disrespect others. They also lose the chance to understand the world beyond their own narrow frame. The Stoic doesn't seek victory in conversation. They don't treat words as a competition, but as a path toward understanding. They know that when we speak, we only repeat what we already know. But when we listen, we open ourselves to what we've never known before. Listening, therefore, is not a passive act. It's an active discipline of a restrained mind. Restraint to not interrupt, to not react immediately, to allow others to express what they need to say. And in that stillness, wisdom is born. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The talkative person listens only to themselves. The wise person listens to understand others." Listening is a mark of freedom, because only those free from the need to prove themselves can stay calm before another's voice. The person who always needs to speak is the one who fears being forgotten, fears losing their place, fears that silence will expose their emptiness. But the peaceful person does not fear silence, for they know it is the voice of inner confidence. When someone interrupts, they don't just break the rhythm of a conversation, they break the rhythm of trust. The one being cut off will slowly withdraw, speak less, and begin to feel that their words no longer matter. Over time, they create distance not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. And once that distance forms, no amount of words can bridge it again. That's why every time you let someone finish their sentence, you're doing more than being polite. You're building an invisible bridge of respect. Interrupting is the act of a mouth that moves faster than the heart. It happens when we place the need to hear ourselves above the need to understand others. But the Stoic knows that self-control isn't only about mastering anger, it's also about mastering speech. Staying silent isn't always easy, especially when we believe we're right. Yet truth never loses its value for being spoken later. Meanwhile, a single interruption can cause that truth to lose its chance to be understood. The one who truly listens shows respect for both sides, the speaker and themselves, because they understand that if they cannot be calm enough to hear another, they cannot hear the voice of reason within their own mind. Outer listening and inner listening are two sides of the same virtue. A person who cannot master the silence of their mouth can never master the silence of their heart. Sometimes respect doesn't lie in praise, but in the pause between two sentences. In that moment of silence when we let others finish, the world feels wider and hearts begin to open. The Stoic remains silent not to appear noble, but because they understand that timely silence is the most refined form of kindness. So if you wish to be respected, begin by offering others your full presence. Don't just listen with your ears, listen with your mind. Don't rush to speak. Let others feel that their words have weight. Respect is not born from intelligence, but from patience. And when we learn to be silent long enough to truly listen, we not only open others' hearts, but deepen our own. A person may speak beautifully, but the one who is respected is the one who knows when to be silent. For within that silence lies a sound the world deeply lacks, the sound of understanding. The final habit is complaining. There are sounds that don't come from the mouth, but from the heart, and a sigh is one of them. Small as it seems, it can fill the air with a heavy cloud that others can feel. Complaining, in its simplest form, is the release of a mind that hasn't yet found its way out. But when it becomes a habit, it's no longer an expression. It's a slow leak of life's energy. A person who complains often doesn't just tire themselves. They drain the space around them. Complaining is how people tell the world they refuse to accept reality. But Stoicism teaches that reality doesn't need our approval to exist. It simply is, whether we like it or not. The wise don't try to change what's beyond their control. They focus instead on what they can shape, their attitude. Every complaint begins with this confusion. We believe that by expressing our discomfort, we'll feel lighter. But in truth, every complaint is another stone we tie to our own back. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer not from things themselves, but from our view of them." Complaining is the clearest proof of that truth. Two people can face the same situation. One chooses to act, the other chooses to complain. One walks forward lightly, the other stays stuck in place. Not because the world is unfair, but because one understands that life owes them no ease. Complaining is the most subtle form of helplessness. It gives us the illusion of doing something, while in reality, we're only avoiding responsibility. When we say life is unfair, others are luckier than me, or everything is exhausting, we're blaming the world instead of examining ourselves. The Stoic doesn't do that. They know that fairness doesn't exist outside of us. It exists in how we face what happens. A calm soul can look at the same adversity without letting it bend their spirit. It's also a way of seeking attention. Because when we complain, we want to be heard, pitied, or at least validated. But the price of that borrowed sympathy is respect. People may feel sorry for us the first time, but by the 10th, they only want to leave. Negativity, when repeated, is no longer pain. It becomes an atmosphere no one wants to breathe. Complaining also weakens the mind. Every word of complaint is like a small blade cutting through the threads of our patience. At first, it only tires us, but over time, it erodes our faith in action. Once "I can't" becomes a familiar phrase, we forget that we ever could. Our words become walls that trap us. The Stoic understands this, which is why they choose silence over complaint. They see silence as the space where reason speaks, while complaining is merely the echo of an untrained instinct. A person who constantly complains can darken a room without saying a single cruel word. Negative energy doesn't need sound, it only needs presence. The Stoic does not judge them because they know complaining is just a symptom of a soul that hasn't yet learned acceptance. They see it as a doctor sees a wound not with anger or fear, but with understanding that it needs healing through awareness, not comfort. Some say that staying silent before what's wrong is cowardice, but there's a great distance between silence and complaint. Silence preserves energy for action, complaint wastes it in vain. The Stoic remains silent not out of fear, but because they understand that the energy of resistance must be placed wisely. If we only speak of the darkness without lighting a candle, we only make the darkness thicker. Complaining is a form of weak resistance. It makes us feel as though we're fighting the world, but in truth, we're only fighting ourselves. Our endurance, our calm, our acceptance that life does not bend to our will. Stoicism teaches that the path to freedom begins the moment we accept what we cannot change. When we stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What can I do with this?" we cease to be victims. We become the ones in control. Silence in Stoic philosophy is not avoidance, it is wisdom. It is the declaration of those who know that words don't change the world, actions do. And to act rightly, the mind must first be still. The one who complains cannot act. They are trapped inside their own story, replaying frustration like a song with no end. But the calm person simply exhales, observes, and does what must be done. Perhaps the most dangerous thing about the habit of complaining isn't that it makes us weak, but that it makes us forget we were ever strong. It wears down courage, teaching us to live with our heads bowed, finding fault in everything. But the Stoic lifts their head not because they feel no pain, but because they know pain is no reason to lose dignity. When we stop complaining, the world doesn't become easier, but our hearts become larger. We begin to see what was always there: patience, gratitude, and adaptability. Life doesn't need to be easy to be beautiful. It only needs us to be awake enough to see beauty even in imperfection. And when we can see that, every reason to complain quietly disappears. The one who accepts adversity without complaint is not numb. They simply understand that calmness is a quiet kind of victory. And in a world where everyone wants to speak of their suffering, the one who chooses silence is already winning through stillness. A person doesn't lose the respect of others in a single moment. It dissolves slowly, bit by bit, through small habits we fail to notice. A word spoken behind someone's back, a promise left unkept, an interruption in conversation, or a daily complaint repeated over and over. These tiny fragments gather, forming an image that fades in the eyes of others. And when we finally ask, why don't they respect me anymore? The answer has often been planted long ago in the quiet, careless moments when we weren't fully aware of ourselves. The Stoic does not fear judgment. They only fear losing themselves within the judgment of others. Because respect, at its core, isn't something we demand, it's something we become. A trustworthy person never needs to beg for trust. A listener doesn't need to prove their understanding. A calm soul doesn't have to boast about resilience. And one who stays silent before another's flaws never needs to preach about kindness. The noblest parts of human character are not declared through words, but revealed in how one lives through the smallest moments of daily life. Respect cannot be bought, nor can it be given by others. It is the truest reflection of one's virtue. When you live with integrity, you no longer need to ask others to treat you well. The world naturally mirrors back the standard you set for yourself. That is the essence of self-mastery, mastering your character before seeking to master your circumstances. If this video made you pause and reflect, share it with someone who may be unknowingly diminishing their own worth. Perhaps they need to hear these words not to be blamed, but to awaken. And if you wish to continue your journey toward inner strength, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Because here, we don't learn how to make others fear us. We learn how to become truly respectable through stillness, self-control, and honesty in every small act of life.